Hey guys, welcome to Read Aloud, day 11 for September 28th. Here we go. Starting to get pretty good at that one. Okay, somebody wanted to say hi.
Hello.
Okay, now I'm gonna read. Here we go. Hey, let's see where we were. Oh, we were in the goblin part. I totally forgot. Okay, here we go. They did not hate dwarves especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, and particularly the orderly and prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them. Oh, we already read that part, hold on. Who are these miserable persons, said the great goblin. Dwarves, and this, said one of the drivers, pulling at Bilbo's chain so that he fell forward onto his knees. We found them sheltering in our front porch. What do you mean by it, said the great goblin, turning to Thorin. Up to no good, I'll warrant. Spying on the private business of my people, I guess. Thieves, I shouldn't be surprised to learn. Murderers and friends of elves, not unlikely. Come, what have you got to say? Thorin the dwarf, at your service, he replied. It was merely a polite nothing. Of things which you suspect and imagine, we have no idea at all. We sheltered from a storm in what seemed a convenient cave and unused. Nothing was further from our thoughts than inconveniencing goblins in any way whatever. That was true enough. Said the great goblin, so you say. Might I ask what you were doing up in the mountains at all, and where you were coming from, and where you were going to? In fact, I should like to know all about you. Not that it will do you much good, Thorin Oakenshield. I know too much about your folk already, but let's have the truth, or I will prepare something particularly uncomfortable for you. We were on a journey to visit our relatives, our nephews and nieces, and first, second, and third cousins, and the other descendants of our grandfathers who live on the east side of this truly hospitable mountain, said Thorin, not quite knowing what to say all at once in a moment, when obviously the exact truth would not do at all. He's a liar, oh truly tremendous one, said one of the drivers. Several of our people were struck by lightning in the cave. When we invited these creatures to come below, and they are as dead as stones. Also, he has not explained this. He held out the sword which Thorin had worn, the sword which came from the troll's lair. The great goblin gave a truly awful howl of rage when he looked at it, and all his soldiers gnashed their teeth, clashed their shields, and stamped. They knew the sword at once. It had killed hundreds of goblins in its time, when the fair elves of Gondolin hunted them in the hills or did battle before their walls. They had called it Orcrist, goblin cleaver, but the goblins simply called it biter. They hated it, and hated worse anyone that carried it. Murderers and elf friends, the great goblin shouted. Slash them, beat them, bite them, gnash them. Take them away to dark holes full of snakes and never let them see the light again. He was in such a rage that he jumped off his seat and himself rushed at Thorin, his mouth open. Just at that moment, all the lights in the cavern went out and the great fire went off, poof, into a tower of blue glowing smoke right up to the roof that scattered piercing white sparks all among the goblins. The yells and yammering, croaking, gibbering and jabbering, howls and growls, curses, shrieking and shrieking that followed were beyond description. Several hundred wild cats and wolves being roasted slowly alive together would not have compared with it. The sparks were burning holes into the goblins, and the smoke that now fell from the roof made the air too thick for even their eyes to see through. Soon they were falling all over one another and rolling in heaps on the floor, biting and kicking and fighting as if they had all gone mad. Suddenly a sword flashed in its own light. Bilbo saw it go right through the great goblin as he stood dumbfounded in the middle of his rage. He fell dead, and goblin soldiers fled before the sword, shrieking in the darkness. The sword went back into its sheath. "Follow me quick," said a voice fierce and quiet, and before Bilbo understood what had happened, he was trotting along again as fast as he could trot at the end of the line, down more dark passages with the yells of Goblin Hall growing fainter behind him. A pale light was leading them on. "Quicker, quicker," said the voice. "The torches will soon be relit." Here's a good picture. Let's see. "Half a minute," said Dory, who was at the back next to Bilbo, and a decent fellow. He made the Hobbit scramble on his shoulders as best he could with his tied hands, and then off they all went at a run with a clink-clank of chains and a many a stumble, since they had no hands to steady themselves with. Not for a long while did they stop, and by that time they must have been right down in the very mountain's heart. Then Gandalf lit up his wand. Of course it was Gandalf, but just then they were too busy to ask how he got there. He took out his sword again, and again it flashed in the dark by itself. It burned with rage that made it gleam if goblins were about. Now it was bright as blue flame for the delight in the killing of the great lord of the cave. It made no trouble whatever cutting through the goblin chains and setting all the prisoners free as quickly as possible. The sword's name was Glamdring, the foe hammer, if you remember. The goblins just call it beater and hated it worse than biter, if possible. Orcus, too, had been saved, for Gandalf had brought it along as well, snatching it from one of the terrified guards. Gandalf thought of most things, and though he could not do everything, he could do a great deal for friends in a tight corner. "Are we all here?" he said, handing his sword back to Thorin with a bow. "Let me see. 1, that's Thorin. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Where are Feely and Keely? Here they are, 12, 13. And here's Mr. Baggins, 14. Well, well. It might be worse, and then again it might be a good deal better. No ponies and no food, and no knowing quite where we are, and hordes of angry goblins just behind. On we go." And on they went. Gandalf was quite right. They began to hear goblin noises and horrible cries far behind in the passages they had come through. That sent them on faster than ever, and as poor Bilbo could not possibly go as fast, for dwarves can roll along at a tremendous pace, I can tell you. When they have to, they took it in turn to carry him on their backs. Still, goblins go faster than dwarves, and these goblins knew the way better. They had made the pass themselves and were madly angry, so that do what they could, the dwarves heard the cries and the howls getting closer and closer. Soon they could hear even the flap of goblin feet, many, many feet which seemed only just round the last corner. The blink of red torches could be seen behind them in the tunnel they were following, and they were getting deadly tired. "Why, oh why did I ever leave my hobbit hole?" said poor Mr. Baggins, bumping up and down on Bomber's back. "Why, oh why did I ever bring a wretched little hobbit on a treasure hunt?" said poor Bomber, who was fat and staggered along with the sweat dripping down his nose in his heat and terror. At this point, Gandalf fell behind, and Thorin with him. They turned a sharp corner. "About turn," he shouted. "Draw your sword, Thorin." There was nothing else to be done, and the goblins did not like it. They came scurrying around the corner in a full cry, and found Goblin Cleaver and Foe Hammer shining cold and bright in their astonished eyes. The ones in front dropped their torches and gave one yell before they were killed. The ones behind yelled still more and leapt back, knocking over those who were running after them. "Biter and beater," they shrieked, and soon they were all in confusion, and most of them were hustling back the way they had come. It was quite a long while before any of them dared to turn that corner. By that time, the dwarves had gone on again, a long, long way into the dark tunnels of the goblins' realm. When the goblins discovered that, they put out their torches, and they slipped on soft shoes, and they chose out their very quickest runners with the sharpest ears and eyes. They ran forward as swift as weasels in the dark, and with hardly any more noise than bats. That is why neither Bilbo nor the dwarves, nor even Gandalf, heard them coming, nor did they see them. But they were seen by the goblins that ran silently up behind, for Gandalf was letting his wand give out a faint light to help the dwarves as they went along. Quite suddenly, Dory, now at the back again carrying Bilbo, was grabbed from behind in the dark. He shouted and fell, and the hobbit rolled off his shoulders into the blackness, bumped his head hard on a rock, and remembered nothing more. Okay, I think we're gonna stop right there because we're at a new chapter, but we are at Riddles in the Dark. This is one of my favorite chapters. It's got a picture there. So. Okay, thanks guys.